I would like to start first, if I may. It seems like there are a lot of expectations for being a journalist working at media companies. You have to know all about, obviously, writing, storytelling, but also the business side, analytics. Now we have to take all these different technologies into consideration. My question to you all is, what do journalists need to know these days to not get behind? And maybe Aela can start answering.
It's a really good question, and I don't know that I have the answer to it. I think journalists ultimately need to know how to tell good stories and need to know how to listen to their audiences. So whether you do a full design cycle or whether you actually are just looking at feedback, I think those are probably the two core things that it still takes to be a journalist. The technology, I'll say it again, is a tool. It's not a means to an end. I don't think anyone needs to just be creating stories with new technologies for their own sake. I think certain stories lend themselves to it, and where those tools are available, it's good to know a bit about them, and it's good to know some basic use of it and how people use it. But I really sort of I caution against, becoming an expert in all things, because ultimately, our core value is as no matter what the tech is, if you're able to tell a good story and you're able to reach an audience, you're able to listen to the needs of what people are telling you, and you'll be able to find a way through.
Mm-hmm. Barbara, what do you think? What's your take?
I agree with what Aela just said. I think you should know what's in the, what's available. Of course, as a journalist, we're always seeing what is coming up, what is new in this environment, but you can't master everything. So if there is one part of technology, there is one piece of technology that you're very interested in, definitely go ahead and learn how to do it and specialize in it. But it's impossible to do everything. So find your strength, and as Aela said brilliantly, the most important is storytelling. If you know how to tell a good story, if you know the basics of journalism, then the next step is going after the technology that you're interested in. But by no means try to master everything, because there's always going to be a new piece of technology. There's always going to be a new trend. And if you just try to run after them, you're going to go nuts.
Mm-hmm. Christina, would you agree or would you disagree?
Basically, I totally agree. I mean, you need these core journalistic skills to tell a story, and these are the basis of everything you do. But I would also say you need some basic tech concepts, like what is an algorithm, how do learning algorithms learn, and how do they work, and how can I use them in my journalistic work, and where are their limits, for example. So I think these are some basic concepts that you should know, and you should also understand the digital landscape in which journalistic pieces and contents are published today and maybe also tomorrow. So just to be able to react on that and to be able to distribute your content wisely. And of course, in the end, you should stay just open and curious to, of course, ever learn new technologies in your lifetime. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. How about Alina?
Yeah, I think very, very good points. You asked about students, right? I would want to add, as a student, you should be curious and open to everything, right? And I really love that universities and journalism schools have shifted towards like embracing all kinds of technologies and innovation methods and all of that. So embrace that, learn all of it, and then go see where your passion really lies. Because I mean, we're lucky enough to have professions where we can really follow our passions, right? And if your passion is writing for a newspaper, go for it. Why not? As long as you know what's out there, right? And then probably a few years later, your passion might shift to something else, and you know it's out there. What I think is really crucial is the mindset that what we do serves our users, and that's something that is still not embraced everywhere in media industry.
Now, are there any questions? Yes, there's one question.
I just recently heard about a report of AI being used for accumulating data or stories to, even to write stories or to use to prepare for writing stories. So I was curious if you're already using stuff like that, or maybe, what's your opinion on AI-based journalism or AI-featured journalism?
I don't really believe in AI-generated journalism as a whole product, but I really believe in AI-fostered journalistic processes, like processes and workflows where we just take single AI tools to conduct certain tasks. I think this really helps, but they will always be supporting systems for us, I would say. Because I don't see them asking the right questions in the beginning, like really listening to people, asking empathetic questions. That really helps our journalism to tackle the problems that people really have. I don't see that in the AI landscape in the next years. Mm-hmm. So I think we should, of course, use them, but as parts of our workflow.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
So that means none of you is scared of AI or new technologies making the journalist obsolete. Alina, you're shaking your head.
No, I mean, I totally agree with Christina. There's always that fear, not only in journalism with AI, right? And it always comes to the moment of singularity. And since the 50s, people have been talking about machines taking over, AI taking over, and that's just not going to happen. I mean, we call it intelligence, but it's not that intelligent in the end, right? And that's exactly what Christina said. The starting questions have to be asked by journalists, and I totally agree that AI can be a great help to journalism.
So would you say with all this new technology, does it make your work easier or harder because you have to keep up and because you have to make your stories better and more, like use more technology and more content, basically?
I would say technology doesn't make my work easier or harder. It makes my work more exciting. So whenever I hear about a new piece of technology that I can use in my work, I'm excited because I know that I can, innovate. I can investigate new stories. I can do something different. For example, the previous question asked about AI, and I'm super interested in learning more and using new AI tools in my work. Of course, there is a learning curve. Of course, every time there is a new technology, you have to learn how to use it, but it doesn't mean you have to become an expert in that technology in order to use it. You can obviously partner with technologists who are experts in this piece in a specific aspect of technology to help inform your story. So I'm always very excited about working with students and with other organizations, maybe like researchers who are who are developing new technology, and we can see how we can apply these technologies in journalism. I wouldn't say it makes life easier or more difficult, just makes everything more exciting.
Mm-hmm. What about Aela?
Not to contradict, but I think technology made life harder, not just journalism harder. I think about the multitude of things that are vying for our attention these days. And I guess looking at journalists in that context, it has brought up a whole unique set of challenges. I talked about the 24/7 front line. Well, journalists are on a stream of social media. They're in a never-ending stream of different distractions, and that goes for journalists, but also people in general. I think where technology does become exciting, it's important to think about whether it's achieving the means to the end that you want it to achieve. I think it's important for journalists to keep across all the trends and to be aware of them. But like I said, it's not important for you to master all of them. And so I think everyone's reinforced, following your passion, following what makes you excited, and rather than trying to be of all trades and master of none, as the saying goes.
Now, I hope these answers were motivating and it sounded exciting. Now, I saw that there are some questions on YouTube or social media. Maybe you can tell us?
Yes, we've got 2 questions. The first question, do you think it is dangerous that social media apps are not regulated, especially if they are used as sources?
Yes, of course. Once you're working with social media, you have to be very careful and use all the steps for verification. So that's why I focus so much on the presentation about geolocation, chronolocation to verify where and when a video was filmed. There is also the verification of user verification. You have to make sure that you're talking to a real person. And of course, you have to understand who that person is, who the other side, the person who posted a video or who posted a photo, who they are, what are their interests, why are they sharing that content. Besides just verifying the content, you have to have a thorough investigation on who the users who are providing you that content are and what they may be interested in, if they have any biases. Of course, if you're able to verify and that content is true, it is valid for your investigation, go ahead and use it with the permission of the user, of course. But yes, it is important to use all the journalistic steps for verifying the content before you use it.
I hear that there's another question. Can you share it with us?
Oh, thank you. And the second question, do we need to establish rules about transparency and accountability when articles are written by AI?
Maybe Alina, coming from Deutsche Welle, should we make it more transparent when an article has been written by AI, basically, or generated by artificial intelligence?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what is always necessary is the usual editorial process, right? So to have an editor look over everything, and then why not make it? I mean, we always put the names of the authors, so why not also mention that? Sounds like a good option.
And Christina nods.
Yeah, I would second that. Since, today, as I see it, we don't really have that many AI-driven articles out there right now. Most of what is published automatically is robot journalism, done mostly without artificial intelligence, I would say. But for example, the projects that we have at Der Spiegel, or had Der Spiegel, regarding the elections, for example, where they published many hundred articles dealing with single regions in Germany and their results. These projects have been made transparent. So there has been an article with a making of where you can really learn about how these robot journalism texts have been produced and why they really have been kept under full control. And there is not a single line really written by AI, since, of course, as Alina has already mentioned, you have to, of course, be secure in the editorial process and to really be accountable in the end. We, of course, need to look over every article that is published or every text that is used in robot journalism. I would also say full transparency is really, really necessary also to keep and to inform our readers and to really gain their trust back. in some cases.
Now, I want to go back to the aspect of embracing technology, something that we've talked about in detail now. And I wonder where the lines are for journalists, in journalism in general. How far should we let, I mean, Aela just mentioned Metaverse in her keynote. How far should we let big companies into the journalistic process? Should there be a line? Should we really embrace all of these technologies offered by big companies, or should we actually try to build platforms and algorithms on our own? What is your take? Maybe Aela can start, and then I would love to hear everyone about this.
Well, I think what we saw with the rise of social media, if we look back in history, is that media companies missed that boat. They missed the ability to be able to own the platforms or create platforms themselves. And as a result, we have seen the consequences of what happened. I think it's incredibly dangerous to just blindly go to these platforms and expect that that will be your entire distribution channel. And I especially think that when we're dealing with virtual environments, the metaverse in future, when I say that we're all going to have to be there, I don't mean that in the sense that we're obliged to, but that in the sense of going to see audiences there, and it will be important for people to experiment, particularly journalists, with those technologies. However, yeah, I do think there are huge ethical dangers, the ethics of broadcasting from someone's living room, or there might be someone else in the house at the time. I mean, the possibilities are endless and mind-blowing. So I do think we need very clear guardrails around that. But what you always see with technology is that things develop quicker than regulations can, or innovation happens quicker than regulations can catch up. And so I think that's why it's important for journalists to be there, to be the ones who call it out when something is crossing an ethical or social boundary.
Christina, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely true. I would also say that, I mean, using their tools is not always necessarily using their clouds or using their platforms. So maybe you could also distinguish in a few cases. And I would also say that, I mean, of course, media companies are in many cases far too small to really develop their own platforms that can really play in the innovation circus on the same scale compared to big tech companies. But maybe we should just try to find other organizations or found other entities that can really do so. I mean, this really seems to be not for single media companies, but for the media system as a whole to maybe find their own solutions, or even at least find their own platforms and clouds for the data sets that they really can then securely store themselves.
Alina.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'm afraid I don't have a great answer to it. I do feel a huge ambivalence around that topic, right? Because Facebook is the company that is responsible for the most spread of misinformation in the whole world, right? And responsible in that sense for the outcome of elections, for genocide, and many other things. So we have a huge problem there, and they don't live up to it, right? They don't act upon that responsibility, and therefore, in a way, the metaverse is scary to me, right? Because if they go with that kind of mindset and build like basically a world, if users adapt to that, that you can live and communicate in virtually, I find that a bit scary, and I find it hard to imagine how politicians will get to regulate it really, because many of them don't understand it, right? So that does scare me for sure. Yet on the other hand, we as media companies need to use those platforms because that's where our users are. For example, we as DW want to serve users in countries of Africa and in many countries of Africa. Facebook and internet is the same thing. It's synonymous. So we can't get around it, right? It makes me hopeful, building on what Christina said, that there are a few initiatives of multiple media companies trying to find a way to strengthen the platforms we have. There's the Beyond Platform initiative and others. But still, I don't see a way out yet. I think in a way we're still dependent of those platforms.
And Barbara, you work on these social media platforms all day, every day. What do you think?
I would second what Alina said, that we have to be where our audience is. So if your audience, if you're public, and in my case, where my sources are, if they are on social media, I have to be there. But use these platforms as they help, to the point that they help your work and not work for them. So what I mean is, if they're useful to distributing your content, or if they're useful to informing or reporting, as they are for, in my case, I will use them, but I will not make content specifically for the platform's needs. We've all seen what happens to organizations whose business models were completely dependent on a specific platform, and once that platform changes their algorithm, that news organization just has no business model. So use those platforms as tools for journalism, and not make journalism for those platforms. That's what I would say.
Thank you. I'm looking into the audience just to make sure that I'm not missing a question. There's one question.
Considering the fact that the world is connecting more and more, and that there are more possibilities to work remote, you showed that you could verify a story just based on the reports from the locals. Do you think there ever comes a time where correspondence, like there's some big media networks still have, that are on correspondence needed anymore, because you can verify questions from your home, from your living room?
I think, thank you for the question. I would say that journalists will always be needed, whether they are based in a location or not. That will depend on the possibilities. So, for example, when we did that story out of Myanmar, there were no international journalists were allowed in the country. So the only way we could really report on that story was from abroad. But of course, once you have someone on the ground, that it's not, you cannot replace that. You cannot replace the local knowledge. You cannot replace the being there, talking to the sources, being face to face. So from one hand, yes, technology has allowed us to work remotely and report on stories on places where you wouldn't be allowed in, or it would be very, very, very difficult for you to report on that story if you were on the ground. But that does not replace the fact of the power of a journalist on the ground, seeing things with their own eyes, meeting sources face to face. So I think one thing adds to the other. It doesn't replace the other.
I think this answers the question quite well. Any more questions from the studio audience? Because I have two last questions, and maybe you all can answer briefly. My first question is, what do you think are the biggest media tech trends we need to look out for in the near future? And Barbara, maybe you can start. The pressure is on.
That's a hard question. I don't know. As I work with OSINT, I'm seeing more and more news organizations experimenting with OSINT, and I'm very excited to see what these new uses of OSINT will be. So I'm mostly looking forward to seeing the new uses of open source intelligence in journalism in the next year or so.
Thank you. Alina, what do you think?
So actually, I just came back from the Silicon Valley a few days ago, and before going there, I underestimated the power behind Metaverse. Everybody's talking about that in Silicon Valley, and Facebook has hired so many people, hundreds and hundreds, that I think that will really be a thing. I assume it will take time until it rolls out. I'm a little skeptical when it comes to users. It seems a little nerdy to me. But who knows how users adapt to it. But for like midterm, I think this is really something that really goes into what Aela does. I think that will definitely be something we have to watch out for.
Interesting. Christina, how about you?
Yes, absolutely. And also, I would just say algorithms and, of course, learning algorithms like in AI systems. I think we have to understand them more and also, just include them in our own workflows much better, not to be just overrun by tech companies.
I'm going to have to talk about the metaverse now, aren't I? Maybe I'll give a really practical example of how this translates to me. But part of my dev team, we have a collaborative classroom, if you like, the headset metaverse, where we are socially engaging with each other in a training setting. And I was shocked how remarkably quickly the part of my dev team that is creating this just started using it naturally. We don't get on Zoom for those meetings anymore. We actually go into VR and sit there talking with each other. And that happened in the course of a couple of weeks, just a whole part of the team switching to that. So I do think that interactive, immersive mediums are going to be the biggest media trend that we're going to see in the coming years. If Facebook is hiring 10,000 people to work on the metaverse, then journalists, we better know what it is, know how to head off some of the ethical concerns that I think are coming. If we think that, what we've seen with social media we haven't seen anything yet. Start putting things on your face, and the amount of data that can be generated from that is incredible. So I would really like to see journalists at least attempting to understand it, at least attempting to use it so they know what it is and how it works, and reporting on it. We need really good journalism to be overseeing this because, as I said, the regulation's not going to catch up. And I would really, to go back to the point of collaboration, it isn't in the DNA of media companies things, but I think this is one thing that we really are going to need each other and each other's resources to report on and to be aware of what's happening.
Well, thank you so much for your evaluations. That means next year we're going to all see each other in the metaverse or on the metaverse, whatever. We'll see. I have one last question again for all of you. Since this conference is a conference from students, media students, for students and other people interested in the media world, what advice would you give to media students, the students who are here, but also the ones who are watching via the live stream? What one advice, or maybe two, would you give to them? Maybe Barbara can start again.
So we've been talking a lot about technology here, and I would say technology doesn't replace good journalism. Technology will never replace good reporting. So it's always great to learn about new tools and try them out. If you're passionate about it, follow it, follow your instincts, but also really learn the basics of journalism. As we said here before, nothing can replace good storytelling. Nothing can replace good journalistic skills like investigating, following the traces of money, finding the sources that you need, analyzing the data that you get. So really, the basics of journalism, it doesn't matter where you publish, what are the new platforms that are going to come in the next few years. nothing will replace good journalism skills. So investing that first, and then follow your instincts to what is the new technology that you're passionate about.
Alina, what's your advice for journalism students or media students?
Yeah, that's again a good question. So, what I would say is, I remember, Ella, I don't know if it was the same for you. All of us who have lived in Silicon Valley for a while thought about staying there and switching into technology, right? Working for, I don't know, Twitter, Facebook, whoever. And I'm personally so glad I didn't do it, because I think having a profession you're passionate for and you can see a sense in is more than you can ask for, right? That's like a guarantee for happiness in your job. And so I'm hugely grateful to have that. And so I think it's a great course you're taking. And I can only encourage you to go on. And also, you're so needed, right? We talked about challenges that come out of new technological developments. One is the societal division, and I think journalists are needed to try and bridge it, and many, many other things. So I want to encourage you. You're on a great path, and you'll have a lot of fun, and you'll always learn. And by the way, we're hiring. In case you want to.
Yes, I retweeted that, so everybody who's interested can see that. Ella, Christina, we only have 1 more minute left. I'm very sorry. Maybe you can just very briefly tell us what advice you would give to students.
Quite briefly, speaking of user centricity, I would just say get in touch with people that are different from you, that are living in different segments of society than you. Ask questions, get in touch. Get to know their challenges and learn why they use technology and why they need media, maybe, and what you can do for them.
Thank you.
I would say something outside of technology, stress management. Arm yourself with techniques that can help you deal with the stresses of the job. The biggest thing we see after a few years is that people really burn out. So find out what works for you, do it a little bit and often, and make sure that you have a good support network around you.
Barbara, Alina, Christina, Ella, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules and talking to us about media technologies and how we can utilize within the journalism process. I want to thank you. What I take away is from all your different aspects that technology can be exciting, but we still have to look out for regulations and be critical about embracing technology without questioning it. And it will never replace journalism, the core journalistic skills. I think that's a great way to end this discussion. Thank you again. Thank you also to the studio audience for asking all these great questions. Thank you.